So we're so excited for the Super Saturday Recovery Summit. This is not your typical meeting. So for those of you that are joining us, we ask that you do not request to share. There will be no live shares. We're going to record this. All of the videos from last month and this month will be added to the homepage of the In the Room's site. But we want to maintain everybody's anonymity. So if you have questions, the first 40 minutes or so will be a presentation. And then after that, if you IM me questions, I will ask them of Dr. Tatkin and he will answer them for you. But we're going to keep everybody out of the box. And so you'll get X'd out. I'm diligent about Xing if people try to join. So it's for a reason. This is just a different platform, different format, but we're really excited to bring this content to you. So it's time, Dr. Rob.
Oh, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Rob Weiss. I am so pleased to be here. This is Super Saturday Recovery Summit number 3. I think number 3. Yes. And what we do here is today we're presenting 3 different professionals in different areas of psychotherapy and addiction. And there are 12-step meetings in between. And our goal here is to bring you people that you would maybe never get to see, rarely get to ask questions of. These are folks who are sort of walking the line of founding and creating the field of addiction as we know it today and relationship healing. So let me just quickly say thank you for those of you who come to my Friday night show. I think we have about 200 people a week now who are coming for sex, love, and addiction, and getting the chance to just chat with me and ask me questions, which is a gift to me. So let me introduce Dr. Stan Tatkin, who I consider a friend and a colleague, but he's so much smarter than me. Like he's one of the smarter guys I know, and I'm reasonably smart. So
you are.
But he's really smart. So let me say something about Dr. Tatkin. He is the founder of the PACT Training Institute, the developer of PACT, which is a psychobiological approach to couples therapy. In truth, I think he's one of the leading couples theorists and therapists in the world. He's a UCLA professor, an author. Most recent book he wrote was a book called We Do, which he's going to be talking about today, which is about sort of the core of why we have relationships, why we need relationships, and how to maintain relationships. Just real quick, Dr. Pack and I have kind of a history together in the sense that he was very much a part of Dr. John Bradshaw's world in the 80s and 90s as that was all developing, and I was very much a part of Dr. Pat Karn's world, and so we both kind of grew up surrounded by gurus and the whole field as it was developing. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stan Tatkin.
There we go.
You can hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Tammy, could you do me a favor and just give me, because I'm going to be looking also at the PowerPoint slides as I go, could you give me like a 10-minute wrap up?
I can. I will.
Heads up.
I will
okay,
do that.
Perfect. All right. Hi, everybody. All right. So this talk is on interdependency in the recovery world. And I first want to just give you, in terms of nomenclature, the difference between interdependency and codependency. Interdependence is not codependence. In fact, if I could go back to the time of, Bradshaw, Pia Melody, and so on, Claudia Black, I would probably want codependency to actually mean interdependency, but that's a whole other thing, and that's not going to happen. So, so codependency is not the same. Interdependency does not preclude autonomy or independence. Rather, independence here is best described as both human conditions, the human need to attach and depend on others for surviving and thriving, right? We're not talking about simply emotional needs. We're talking about on a survival level. So the term codependency, most of you probably already know, came from a great many writers that influenced AA, ACOA, Al-Anon, CODA, and even SLA. People like Terry Kellogg, Claudia Black, Melody Beatty, Pia Melody, John Bradshaw, who I was with in the beginning. So codependency comes out of the idea of the co-alcoholic. It morphed into several other interpretations and became a kind of a pejorative idea, such as dependent personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and the like. So let me just give you an idea of what interdependency actually should mean. And we're talking here about shared purpose and shared vision. So let's take first the existential givens. We don't know why we exist. Life has no inherent meaning, right? Except the meaning we give it. We are all alone, even though we can bond and we can share things. We're never really on the same page. We are actually, as the existentialists say, truly alone. And we're all going to die. So yippee. Though each of these remains are each of these givens are still indisputable, it is our primary attachment relationships that allow us to be healthy and happy and sane. And this has been studied now for decades, that the human primate thrives actually requires human interaction and human bonding. So a shared mythology means that we are co-creating a relationship. Now, a relationship doesn't really exist. A relationship is an abstraction, but it is something that is given meaning, and that's called a shared mythology if it is shared. So you and I define a relationship by what we think it should be as adults, fully conditional, right, and equal power. We decide how it should be, and that is the thing that is greater than us, the relationship that we have created, continue to create, and hopefully it is big enough to contain who we really are, including our most difficult parts, and who we're going to be. So think of it as our milieu, our definition. And in case you were wondering, across civilization, there have been no unions, except for those where it's just dominance only, right? Might is right. But people who elect to get together usually is around, let's not do this anymore because we're killing each other. Let's not do this anymore because we're raping each other. Let's not do this anymore because we can't seem to prosper because we keep having everything stolen. Let's do this instead. And so this idea of shared purpose has been around since the beginning of civilization. It is the very meaning of civilization. So, so together we survive and thrive, or we perish. One thing you probably should know is that in the world of love relationships, nature doesn't care. Nature only cares about continuation of the species. We care about relationship. But left to our own devices, relationships will not last very long. And that is, and I'll explain more later, because we are memory-based automatic creatures that unless something else happens where we have to become self-aware, we're just going to do what we know, and what we know is what we've experienced. And that's going to last only so long in unions that depend on fairness and justice and sensitivity. So love, attraction, and shared interests in this area are not enough. So we're out of the area of codependency already. We're not talking about feelings. Feelings come and go. They're not reliable. Purpose is, purpose and principles are, and of course, a shared vision. In interdependency, we're mutual stakeholders in our fate. And our devotion to our absolute safety and security is a necessity and actually not a luxury. So a big part of this has to do with social justice theory and also what we know about civilizations. So first, let's just start with some facts about the human primate, of which we all are. And I think you will find that these are true if you really take a look at human history. All human beings tend to be aggressive and warlike, selfish, self-centered, impulsive, moody, fickle, highly influenceable by groups and others. We can change our affiliations on a dime. Always disappointed by what's missing, always aware of what we don't have, and always comparing and contrasting. All of these are features, by the way, in survival, and they're not in the area of relationship, not so much. So why do we have social contracts? Because left to their own, people tend to do stupid shit. Two differentiated people, to live in peace and prosperity, there must be guardrails that protect them from each other. And if people aren't thinking this way, they will soon find out why it's a bad idea to just go on through life without creating rules, principles, governance, laws, and so on. Feelings are unreliable. Only shared principles of governance, how we govern each other and everyone else, can ensure safety and security. And this gets into what I wrote the last book on. This is what we do, and this is what we don't do. This is basically the language of people who are sharing a space, a physical space, an emotional space, a psychological space. This is what we do, this is what we don't do. Otherwise, we will certainly run roughshod over each other, especially when we're under stress.
Dr. Tatkin, Rob wants to insert something. Hang on one second.
So Dr. Tatkin, your audience really probably doesn't have a lot of professional experience. So I think some of the language that we're hearing is probably not familiar to them. So whether or not you lose the slides, I would say if you can be a bit more colloquial, that'll probably help people understand I mostly understand what you're saying, but I think even for me, it's a bit high
He's really
level.
smart.
Yeah, so if that's okay to say to you, I know your slides are set up for professionals, but this is an audience that really just wants to understand how to get their shit together. So if you can help with that, I'd really appreciate it in whatever way. I know how cool you are to chat. I think you can just chat through this. Okay. That would be my thought for you. Tammy, can I jump out of here?
Yeah. Okay. So forgive me. A lot of this is packed with a lot of information, and a lot of information that may be difficult to process. What we're talking about here is creating unions whereby two people, or three, or four, or five, or 10, or 100, are thinking and pointing in the same direction. Two different people, two different personalities, two different histories. It's not a problem. Never has been. But it is our agreements that allow us to do the right thing. And by doing the right thing, I'm talking about what you and I agree is the right thing. So we're talking about relationships here. This is all about relationship and the quality of relationship. We can get into, and I plan to get into, attachment and arousal regulation as well, because these are also essential aspects of getting along with another human being. But we also have to understand that our tendency toward addiction is not just genetic, not just psychobiological. There are definite issues having to do with the brain and addiction. This is process addictions, behavioral addictions, compulsions, but also substance, right? We know that there is a brain part here that is active, but I'm also here to say that we can pretty much predict how people will self-soothe through their life, and that's generally based on two areas. One area is one's memory of and consistency in feeling safe and secure while depending on another person. And right there, we have a problem with the general population. When I talk about secure, insecure attachment, I'm not talking about pathology or personality. I'm simply talking about how one adapts to one's environment. And the environment here are the caregivers. So caregivers set basically the culture. Babies, children adapt to that culture and figure out through thousands and hundreds of thousands of interactions what the rules are, what the game plan is, what we do, what we don't do in this family. And in many families where relationships are not the central good, the self is the central good too much of the time. In family cultures where the self overrides the good of the relationship, there tends to be a system that children adapt to that becomes too unfair and too unjust and too insensitive too much of the time. That is the way it goes. Children don't get a choice, right? It's about survival. But the problem with these cultures that are insecure, that are pro-self oriented, is that unless we learn otherwise, we're going to carry that over into our future relationships. We're just going to do what we know, and what we know is what we've experienced. And so if I am somebody who grew up in a family where on an attachment level, there was neglect, not on a material level, but on an attachment level, where I was not interacted with continuously, very little face-to-face, eye-to-eye, skin-to-skin in a continuous way with a caregiver who was fully available, present, attentive, curious, resourced, right? If I didn't have that, I may have spent a lot of time by myself. And that is an adaptation. Spending a lot of time by myself drives me into my own mind because I'm not interacting enough with the outside world, and in particular with the most important people in my life. That adaptation takes several different forms. One form is that I learn very quickly that if I signal to a parent, I either won't get a response, the response will be slow, or the response will not be what I signaled for. It'll mismatch. And what will happen is I will stop signaling, start to extinguish signaling, because what's the point? In families like the one I'm describing, where there is a lot of distancing and dismissiveness, I am not going to be very expressive, because expression, emotional expression isn't big in my family, including facial expression, perhaps not. But very, very early on, we know this from studying babies, this need for all human beings for proximity seeking, this is the universal come hither, come to me, this universal need to look for physical proximity, psychological, emotional proximity with another is deeply wired into the human primate. And in distancing cultures, that is discouraged. And so the baby in this culture tends to stop proximity seeking. There's another aspect. Babies like physical contact, vocal contact, sustained, and they can tolerate that quite a while. Their lack of toleration usually comes from the caregiver's lack or intolerance of what's called contact maintenance. How long can I maintain eye contact, skin contact, in an adult life talking about us, just staying related? So that's happening as I am a neglected child in this distancing family culture that's overly pro-self. The pro-self nature of this particular culture, which I call islands, but they're really in the research world called avoidance, tend to be very internal, tend to over-rely on a strategy of self-care called autoregulation. Autoregulation is normal. It's one of 4 strategies we use to take care of our nervous systems, basically to regulate ourselves. Autoregulation is there from the very beginning. The only thing about autoregulation is that it's self-stimulatory and self-soothing without the need for another person. That doesn't mean that it's exclusive, but for people growing up in the island culture, it does become exclusive, because as an island baby, I spend a lot of time in my head in fantasy. I spend a lot of time stimulating and soothing myself. And I come from a family that doesn't really want to interact with me unless they need something from me. At least that's the subjective experience. So I don't like intrusion. I don't like to be interfered with. I am very concerned about losing my autonomy and my independence. And I am constantly, almost constantly, defaulting to this self-care state of autoregulation, which is basically hyper-focused. So autoregulation, reading a book, watching a movie, masturbating, pornography, drinking alone, whatever. Even meditation can be used this way. It's not antisocial, it's just not pro-relationship, because it depends on lack of engagement. And why would I, coming from an island culture, want that? Because of the way my interactions go in my family, I carry a lot of interpersonal stress. Just being with someone who I depend on is stressful because I have to work very hard to hide, to not get into conflict, which I'll lose, to protect myself from the demands that come from outside of me that seem to need me but not want me. In other words, I feel like a tool, like I'm used. And so I feel better being alone. Now, the reason I'm saying all of this is that a lot of addictive behavior comes from a way of managing one's own internal state by avoiding using another person, and for very good reason. Other people are too difficult. They're too difficult. I find it too stressful. I can't really be myself without creating conflict. I don't want conflict. I just want this person to stop talking or leave the room or just get out of my way. And so I'll say, yes, thank you, sure, okay, I'll comply, I'll avoid, I'll ignore, all right? But I don't engage. So I look to other ways of managing my internal state. What better way to do that but to choose autoregulatory functions or substances or activities? So when we talk about addiction, it's too simple to just say it is a genetic disease. It is a personality issue. All of those are there, right? It's called diathesis. Diathesis is a confluence of all of these different elements. But make no mistake, the basic, center of addictions goes to interpersonal relationships, goes to the safety and security of our relationships and how we think of them. If I depend on you, I remember what it's like. That's a true thing. My memory is, it's not such a good idea. If I do that, if I'm an island, I'm going to lose my privacy. I'm going to lose my stuff. I'm going to lose my independence. I'm going to feel like a tool again. I can't be myself because being myself causes problems. So the only way I can be myself is outside of this orbit. I'm not free. And the way that I protect myself ends up being threatening to another person. And so this eventually causes a problem. I'm protecting myself for good reason, but it's not played outwardly the same way I think. The other person is likely to take what I do as very, very threatening. For instance, conflict avoidance in and of itself is considered threatening. If you think about it, you know it's true. The other person can't engage. They can't know it's true. They can't hear the truth because the other person is constantly figuring out how to stay out of trouble. So that's one side of the coin. Let's take the other side of the attachment coin. Now that I'm on this, I might as well stay on it. The other side of insecure attachment. And remember, insecure means I'm anxious. I'm anxious about my sense of being able to feel fully safe and secure, moving away from you and moving toward you, clinging to you, depending on you, and becoming autonomous. I am free to do either without consequence. That's secure. Anything else isn't. And the degree to which it isn't is the degree to which I'm going to be insecure, and my defensive patterns are going to be more pro-self and not pro-relationship. So on the other side, I may be, instead of distancing, I come from a family where it was encouraged for me to cling, to stay young, dependent, nearby. Pro-self again, the parenting, I'm needed, not wanted, I'm needed by the parent to regulate their emotional state. On the island side, I'm needed to regulate their self-esteem. Very different. So islands are performance animals. It's about performance, appearance, money, power, intelligence, youth, beauty, right? Those are the goods, those are the values that translate to love and security. On the other side, it's how well I can regulate one of my parents who maybe is alcoholic or depressed or dealing with unresolved trauma, or is themselves from a clingy family who cannot tolerate any kind of autonomy. So this we call the wave. Wave children are encouraged to stay close and discouraged when they try to individuate or separate. This is because of a parent's own need. Here's the problem also. Parents that are wave parents tend to get overwhelmed easily. They have a hard time with frustration. They have a hard time dealing with what they wrought. A clingy child who's whiny and wants to engage all the time. This parent gets overwhelmed and alternately, aside from having them come hither, pushes away, ignores, gets angry, stop bothering me, go to your room. Don't you see I'm busy, I'm talking. These parents tend to be preoccupied. And so the child is getting an alternating world of be with me, lots of contact maintenance, lots of proximity seeking, and then go the fuck away. This makes for a very angry kid, a very ambivalent kid, and a kid that's not going to take risks, but is going to wait for others to do things before they do them themselves. So whereas islands will go to addictions in order to bolster their sense of self-esteem. Stimulants are very good, right? Alcohol is very good. Sexual acting out is really good. Anything to make me feel important, youthful, beautiful, whatever. But I'm not related. I'm auto-regulating, even in sex, by the way. Right? So I can't be myself in a relationship. That's where I'm young. That's where I can't really be a grown-up in interdependence, because that's too dangerous. I tend to run instead of engage. Engaging dangerous, fleeing safe. And I tend to be myself outside of the relationship, which means I'm depositing parts of myself everywhere so nobody has all the information. That keeps me really safe. The wave is afraid of rejection, abandonment, withdrawal, and will use drugs and alcohol and sex as a way to shore up the emotional vulnerability to abandonment, to not being wanted, not being loved. This is a constant fear, and it's based on reality. Before you go and start thinking that these are people that are just difficult people because they want to be, they are remembering what happened, which actually did happen. And unfortunately, because they don't understand, and they have partners that don't understand, they amplify this belief system through multiple relationships, which either consolidates them fully in this defensive position or relaxes them and they can develop into more secure. So the wave is negativistic, pushes away. As a wave, my ambivalence comes up when you get near. My ambivalence comes up when something good happens, because as soon as I think of something good happening, I know something bad is going to follow. So I take care of that myself. What I'm most afraid of, I do. I tend to punish. I tend to stay angry. I tend to hold on to grudges. I tend to withdraw, reject, threaten the relationship. I tend to go to other people for comfort and to basically talk to. So whereas the avoidant island auto-regulates too much, the wave or the anxious ambivalent, they're both anxious, engages in a form of self-care, which is also normal, found in infancy, called external regulation. External regulation is one that goes in one direction only. And it's pro-social, but it lacks simultaneity. So I focus on you. What about you? I want to know about you, as a way to hope to get you interested in me. I can't say, ask me about myself. I can't do that. I can't put my neck out like that. I have to wait. And so I will take care of you. That's codependency. I want to know everything about you. I want to take care of you. Want to talk? And if I'm upset, I want to talk and I don't want to hear you. I'll call everybody on the planet until they give up, because I need other people to stimulate me and to calm me down. So those are the two there that coincide with addiction processes throughout the lifespan that aren't just about addiction. They're about attachment, fears, and insecurity, and how one feels they can use another person, which is basically people are drugs. Relationship is a drug. It's the best drug. It is actually nature's glue. But if I don't feel like that's possible, I won't do it. Okay, so we have attachment fears based on reality that organize us to protect ourselves as soon as we feel like we're depending on somebody or someone's depending on us. Doesn't happen until then, because it's a memory issue. So that's going to come. And there's an arousal regulation issue. They're separate, but they're connected in some ways. In that the way that that distancing folk care for themselves tends to be focused on the self, not relationship, on self-esteem, not loss of relationship, and on protecting themselves from interpersonal stress by doing everything alone. It's basically a masturbatory world. And in this world, adults, kids are vulnerable to their own mind, which is not exactly Disneyland. So because I'm so internal, everything is all the calculations are being done in my head. I rarely go outside. I rarely check anything. I don't tell anybody what I'm really thinking, because that would get me in trouble. And so I'm alone and I'm isolated, but I don't feel bad. And that's the problem with the island, is that their aloneness, their isolation, their addiction to alone time, the feeling like I want you in the room, I mean, I want you in the house, just not in my room, is really the sentiment, is a prison that feels okay. I'm not aware that I'm unhappy until I get into a relationship and that person makes me feel unhappy. Otherwise, I'm not aware. Why am I not aware? Because in the absence of something, I have nothing to point to say, this is why I feel the way I do. Whereas waves and people with trauma have events they can point to. I was beaten, I was raped, I was molested, I was shamed. All these things I can remember. That's better than a fishbowl effect, where nothing happened. And I've never been out of this fishbowl. I don't know the difference. How do I recognize the absence of something? So it's a particularly hard road for islands in their recovery, because it really takes some data for them to get that I kind of do this all the time. Most of the time I think it's the other person, I'm just not that into you. It's probably you. I've lost my libido. I'm not turned on by you. I think it's you. And this keeps happening, and I start to think, maybe it's me. And so it takes a little longer sometimes for people in this area. Interdependence bypasses all of this stuff, because the reality is that we need other people. We are herd animals that pair bond within herds. It's indisputable that, except for some few outliers out there, we don't exist well, mentally, physically, without being bonded to another person. And in particular, we do not fare well if we do not have at least one secure functioning relationship in our life. We die earlier, we get sicker physically, we have more mental illness. This we know. And so, what overrides all of these island wave issues is that we need to survive together. You and I come together and we make agreements. We don't expect that we're going to be perfect. We can be completely fucked up. That's fine. We just have to understand that our survival is at stake. Let's have each other's backs. Let's be completely devoted to each other's well-being, health, safety, and security, not because it's easy, but because we can, and because the alternative is bad.
I'm going to interrupt. You've got about 10 more minutes. For those of you that are trying to jump into the share box, this meeting is being recorded, so we're not doing that. But if you IM me, I've got a couple of people who have already stacked some questions in there. So in about 10 more minutes, we'll start answering questions. But I will remove you if you're in the share. So just IM me things. But thank you. That's my public service announcement for the moment.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, and what I didn't say is in the handouts. You can read those and try to figure them out. What I want to say about this last part here is that adult relationships are, in fact, conditional, fully conditional. Unconditional relationships were in childhood. That ship sailed. That's over. That's done. Make no mistake, adult relationships comprised of two individuals, completely different, both of them pain in the asses, both of them disappointments, both of them irritating, both of them a burden. That's not a problem. But they come together with a shared vision, shared purpose of survival and thriving, how they're going to do business, how they're going to protect themselves from each other, because given our own natures, we are going to fuck it up. We are going to do something that is insensitive, unfair, unjust, too much, without repair, without apology, without amends, and that can't work. All relationships will fail because of it. The only relationships that can last a long time are ones that are based on a purpose. We are on each other's sides. We exist in an orbit with each other, and we rule the world. We're governors, we're big bosses, we're the generals. We decide what is and what isn't. We create this universe that is our relationship. It's our co-creation, not our parents, not somebody else's, not our culture's, it's ours. All we have to do is agree, and all we have to do is be truthful about the agreement, and then we put in guardrails. If you behave this way, I'm going to cue you, I'm going to tell you, you know what, that's not cool. You're going to yield. Yes? Yes. Good. Okay, that's what we're going to do. You're going to do the same for me. This is going to be very necessary, putting in guardrails. It's called policies. It's called principles, because without that, people do stupid things. They do terrible things. And so it's unwise not to have that. You can be an island wave, a narcissist, a borderline. You can be a crazy person. You can be an asshole. It doesn't matter. People have been doing it since the beginning of time. It doesn't matter who they are. It's what they agree to. And are they in reality that this is not a luxury? This is a necessity. And either of us, we're both sharing power here, two bosses. Either of us mess with the environment, the ecosystem that we're building, we both suffer. Mutual stakeholders in this. That's the only way to move through this. And as we correct our behavior and we decide what the right thing is to do, and we hold each other's feet to the fire that we agreed on, that is how we get better. That is how we work through these things. You don't go into analysis to work through these things and then expect to be in a relationship because you're dead by that. You do it now, you do it correctly, looking at reality, coming up with a shared vision, make sure you're pointing in the same direction and not in two different directions, because that won't work. And you do it soberly as adults, looking forward, what could possibly go wrong, and you take it seriously. It's not about love. It's about character. It's about sticking to a principle. That's what rises. That's what makes people rise and become more and better. There's a lot on the brain on this, but I've run out of time, and I don't want to bore you with it. But this is a very important thing, especially for our time, even though our time has been repeated throughout history. We're in a terrible time right now, and we're in a time where people are behaving badly and according to what they think, and it's not necessarily pro-social. We're in a time where we don't know what's true. People are allowing each other to gaslight, to lie, to be deceptive, and so on. This doesn't bode well for survival. So here I'm only talking about two people, not the world, two people making that world the way it ought to be by agreement, holding each other to it, and moving forward in life, protecting each other. One other thing. If people are agreeing to limiting each other based on, I know what I did or what I do isn't really good, so I'll stop. But trust me, everybody will repeat everything because we're automatic. We're fully automatic and reflexive. Not a problem. I'm going to do what I always do, not because I'm doing it purposely, but because I'm doing it automatically. That's where you come in, partner, and say, no, not so fast. You can't do that. I can't. Remember, we agreed. I can't do it. You can't do it. So no, don't. That's power. Both people having the same equal power to limit each other, but also giving permission to push each other to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do if they were on their own. That's awesome.
This was awesome. I've got so many questions, but there are so many questions, so I will hold mine if we get a chance. So the first one is, I'm trained attachment theory and have done quite a bit of my own personal work. My professional experience has been in early childhood. As a betrayed partner, I believe that my betrayal exploited my core attachment injuries, but I cannot for the life of me figure out how to help myself heal. The relationship has ended. I'm working with a betrayal trauma therapist, but do you have any other resources or strategies? So
here's what I tell people. We're hurt by people, we're healed by people. You have two choices. One, stay in therapy forever. The other is to just get a dog or a sea monkey and give up on people because they're really a pain in the ass. The other is to think differently and think of the relationship you want, not the person. What should the relationship, what should it be? We put the relationship first. Maybe that's one principle. We tell each other everything, full transparency. That's non-negotiable. We have each other's backs. We protect each other in public and private. These are things that I'm looking for somebody to go on that mission with me. They either fulfill that, are able to do that, want to do that, or fuck off. And here's the difficult thing. We have a tension between the right thing to do and the attachment system. The attachment system keeps us from doing the right thing because we don't want to lose somebody we've become attached to. That's a good thing in nature, especially good for continuation of the species. A bad thing in modern times when we live a long time and we're dealing with bad actors. So really start to think about your principles. Really start to think about what the relationship going forward should be, and make sure the person, they don't have to be, an epitome of mental health, but they have to be willing. They have to be willing and convincing that they're on the same page. They get it. Let's do that. Let's not do that. That's how you correct this, by going back in, but vetting this partner with your friends, male, female, children, adults. Have everybody sniff you guys out. That's the way it's always been done. Don't just trust yourself there. But think ahead. Think about the relationship and what's a deal breaker, and accept nothing else. You were betrayed because the relationship structure was set up that predictably the wheels would have come off. The structure is everything. How the two of you imagine a relationship, how the two of you envision it, dream it, build it. You're the architects, and then you enforce everything.
Okay, next question. This person has been going to therapy 3 times a week and has been sober 27 years.
Congratulations.
Yes, that's awesome. I'm the only one left in my family. They all passed away. Other family doesn't talk to me. How do I overcome this?
Get a new family. You know, the nice thing about the world is, first of all, there's a lot of us. And there are a lot of other people there that are loving, that are more than happy to be, the generated developmental stage of life of mentoring, of wanting to be there to redo maybe their parenting that they did that screwed them up. There are ways of building families out there, and that's what you should do. I remember a story about a little girl who's being treated badly in the schoolyard, and I can't remember how this went, but was told, always turn around and scan the environment for somebody who loves you and go there. Just go to people who love you. Go to people that you can depend on. Go to people who are willing to do that in return. Not one direction. It's out there.
Yeah, and I think, like, there's the biological family that we're born to. We don't get to choose that, but
No.
yeah, the family and friends I have created, particularly. So like, I love the recovery community, and my friends, the people that support me and that I support, very much within the recovery community. So, so you can create the family.
Yes.
You can create that village that you need. So
not only can you must, because that ship sailed. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
There's nothing there. And so the question to everybody who is still being held back by childhood trauma bonds, is it fair to do? Is it fair to hold on to those relationships when they're gone? Is it fair? Life is short. Create your life. Create the relationships you believe you should have.
Well, and I had to grieve losses of relationships that could never be what I had hoped them to be. And with this person, like you're saying, these people are, have physically left this earth. So, or are not, the others are not available. So grieving, I mean, it's okay to grieve those losses and then find other support. So the next question, Dr. Tatkin, could you please, it says, if we identify with his descriptions of waves and islands, how do we know which type of attachment styles we are more prone to? Is it important to recognize these, or more important to simply correct both?
The only thing about attachment to keep in mind is that insecure attachment, if uncorrected, is simply a memory of trauma, of relational trauma, small t trauma, and that understanding, if I'm an island, understanding my behaviors that are not pro relationship, I have to take responsibility. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I snapped at you for interrupting me. That was wrong. Yes, I will come right now. To give me 5 minutes, and I'll come. And I'll be there. Taking responsibility for our behaviors, but then also understanding the animal we're with. Because whether you're an island, anchor, or wave, it doesn't matter. Our job in relationship is to find the baby in the other person, is to become an expert on the other person. That is how we work. It works in this direction. And believe me, psychobiologically, neurologically, this is the only way relationships actually work. We have a model that doesn't work. I take care of myself, you take care of yourself. That's fine in the outer world, not in close dependency relationships. We're in each other's care, and it's even. It goes in both directions, and it's pay to play. That's how we get out of this thing. It doesn't really matter whether you're an island. If you're dealing with memory of hurt, and your behavior is altered because you're afraid, nay, you are predicting it's going to happen, and that's making you appear dangerous. If you're with somebody who understands, you understand yourself, and you don't beat up on yourself or anybody else for these things I've just told you, that's not the purpose. You use it to understand. Only through understanding can we help somebody out, by not amplifying what they're most afraid of. That's the problem. Without our rising above and really becoming aware and present and paying attention to the person we're with and learning them, we will do what we always do automatically, not purposely, and we will amplify each other's fears. That is the nature state of the human primate.
We're getting a number of questions asking about the recording, so I'm just going to give a global answer to that. The recordings for May and also for this month will be on In the Room's homepage, I think this next week, so watch for those. But they are being recorded and will be available. And then let's see, there was something else. Oh, that was that one. Okay, so then, you know, you were talking about relationships with equal power, and I thought I get calls all the time. So I answer the phone for Seeking Integrity Los Angeles treatment program. I get lots of calls from betrayed partners. Feel free. So what I hear, I can't tell you how often, is an unequal power relationship. I hear he's betraying me, and this is just one scenario, but I hear he's betraying me, but he won't, and then you do anything to change it. So it feels like a very out of balance, relationship. So, if we're looking at a we do an interdependence, what are some things possibly that someone can do to start shifting and making it more of a we?
The fact is, the reality is, it is equal power, unless you're in some other culture where it's deemed otherwise. But it's equal power if you say so. Everything is what you say it is. So if somebody says, I don't have any power in this relationship, and they're not firing their other partner, all right, they're not getting out to find another system that is fair and equal, they're part of the problem, you see. These are two adults that are responsible for holding each other to account. And it's really, really important, because everybody needs to be held to account. Boundaries, limits, cross this line and you won't like it, right? But I've got to throw it out. I've got to enforce. It's one thing to say, I want secure functioning. It's another thing to make sure I am going to do what's necessary to get it. But because of the attachment system, I'm more prone to fear abandonment and loss than stand by any principle. That's a very cynical way of looking at things, but it is way most people often, well, a lot of people do, very cynical. I don't ever think I can get what I want. I don't think I deserve to get what I want. Therefore, I'll just stay here because I can't quit you. And that is a self-harming decision. Now, if we were in individual therapy, I would talk to that person that way. In couple therapy, I would still talk to that person in that way, because the other partner needs somebody to stand up to them. They need that for each other. So in couples, no angels, no devils. Where there's one, there's always the other. It's a system. And that's the thing that's really hard to get across. And this is, again, holding on to our childhood trauma bonds. Part of growing up is letting go of those and recreating what we think is right based on our ethics, because we're talking about an ethical system. We're creating an ethical system that's based on principles, which means we hold to these, or we're not who we say we are. So a lot of people want things, they're not willing to do anything to get them. And people just have to face that fact that there is no decision without loss. It's a pay to play, you break it, you fix it. This is a serious matter. This relationship is conditional, based on terms. Break the terms, you're fired. I'm fired, or I'm put on notice, because it can't happen. It can't happen. It's not about love. It can't happen. Our lives depend on our fealty to each other's safety and security. So, so that's what I would say. We have a system that isn't operating in reality.
And I hear what you're saying. And when I get those betrayed partners, I feel like you're going to remain stuck if nothing changes. And so if they don't take that step and say there are consequences, it's going to remain that way. So somebody, you just mentioned principles. So somebody said, please define principles. Principles are, one, the rules we believe in and follow, practice and don't practice, general laws or truths that apply to almost everyone. So
I already know where they're going.
Okay.
So rules are for kids. Laws are for the general population. You break the law, you go to jail. Principles are for adults. Principles are things that we think of that have to do with what is good, what is right, what is not just right for me, but what would be right for you as well. That's a principle. Those are things, principles are things where we'll go to jail to support. We will die to support. We will go to the mat to support. It is a belief in something that is true and right, the right thing to do. I choose that over the thing that feels good. I choose that over the thing that keeps me out of trouble, right? It's not about staying out of trouble. It's not about hurting you. It's about holding to an idea of how we should be that is definitely elevated above the basic human condition, which is to do whatever I please, whenever I want, especially if I'm not happy. But, you know, people have to understand that everyone is cool when they're good, when they're happy, right? You go to the most dangerous person on the planet, and when they're in a good mood, they're really nice. You just don't want to be there 5 minutes later. The problem isn't feeling good. The problem is, what do two people do when they don't want to do it? What do two people do when they don't like each other, when they're not attracted to each other, when they're mad at each other? That's when the rubber hits the road. Principles is holding to guidelines that have to do with ethics, fair and right and just, that I do regardless of how I feel, because that's what I do.
This is a great question. Can a person be both an island and a wave?
Not equally. That's
okay.
A little crazy. But people who are more anchors in the central area of secure are islandish or waveish at any given time.
Okay.
But they're not card carrying, you know, dyed in the wool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the next question. So where does love come in this system? I thought this was the main part of a relationship.
Now, love jettisons you to have babies or to be together, something in nature that you're on drugs. It's love. It's a different kind of love. The kind of love I'm talking about is earned. It's earned on a daily basis by what I do and what I don't do. I show you more than I tell you that I'm loyal. I show you more than I tell you that I'm going to do the right thing instead of what I want to do right now. I'm going to show you, right? It is a demonstration, and that's earned, and that's hard to replace, because it's not just a feeling I get. It's not just the smell of you. It's you do things. You do awesome things. You know me. I know you. There's a real growth there in moving through time, becoming more and more complex together. That is a different, deeper kind of love, and that's the one I'm pitching.
I think that was a great ending. So thank you so much. I just teared up too, because I was like, that's, you know, I'm fortunate that is what I have. I have somebody that I know has my back. We're better together. You know, I'm so grateful that I've learned enough tools to be able to do it mostly right. I don't always, but
it's a practice.
You know, yeah, it's a practice, and
it's a practice.
And he's a good guy. So grateful for your time today. So the slides, in case you missed it, at the top, you'll see the interdependence in the recovery world. You can download those and follow along. Dr. Tatkin's information on PACT is on one of the slides. You can find out more about him. He has books. He's got a podcast on sex, love, and addiction with Dr. Rob. Go to your 12-step meetings. Join us in an hour. Jamie Marich will be talking about trauma and the 12 steps. So again, thank you. Very grateful for your time today.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Rob, for intervening. This is much better than going
It was
on.
great. So thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.